Hello, and thanks for joining us for another edition of Mid-American Gardener, the stay-at-home edition. I'm your host, Tanisha Spain, and with me today are three of our veteran panelists who are here to answer your questions and help you solve the mysteries that are going on in your garden. So I'll leave their introductions to them, and they can tell you a little bit about who they are and what their specialties are outside. So John, we'll start with you.
Oh, okay. My first show and tell is a couple of...
Well, first you have to introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm John Bodensteiner. I'm a Vermain County Master Gardener, and I like vegetables, perennials, trees, shrubs, just about anything that grows in my yard. I've got a little bit of everything, so I like a big variety of plants, succulents.
A generalist, if you will.
Yes, a generalist.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, Richard.
Hello, I'm Richard Henschel. I'm a horticulture educator here in northern Illinois. My official counties are Kane, DuPage, and Kendall, although I work in all of northern Illinois. And it's still Zone 5 here, not Alaska.
Okay. And Marty.
Hi, my name is Marty Alanya. I am a retired landscaper. I had my own gig for about 25 years, and when I counted how much it actually was, I thought, well, probably my back would like if I'd quit. But I still design, and I love it. I just, you know, not quite as hardy as I was 25 years ago, sadly.
Fair enough. You earned it, right?
All right.
All right, so we've got show and tells, we've got questions, we've got all kinds of stuff to talk about. So I would like to start, if I may. I have a show and tell that comes with a question for our panelists. So as I've been digging stuff up outside and bringing them in, I made some cuttings of some basil a few weeks ago. And as we're all starting to begin our propagation, I would like to know, when do we know that the roots are ready to go from whatever you've got them in into soil? So are these good roots, and am I ready to plant them? And feel free, everybody, to weigh in on this one.
You're ready.
Plenty. Yeah, plenty.
I'm really quite jealous. I did the same thing. This is Thai basil, and you can see how little my roots are yet compared to yours. And I could even do mine. They technically, if as long as they're taken care of, and yours are especially, you want to be very, very careful, being that those roots are so sturdy. You'll want to be careful not to break them off and when you're putting them into soil. But and then keep them well watered for the first couple of days until they get acclimated to the soil, and you'll be fine.
Okay. Anybody else?
I was actually going to suggest you might cut like a third of them off, the roots.
Ah, that's a different
Just trim them, just with a scissor, just trim them a little bit, and then they'll branch out a little more inside the pot, because they're going to have to acclimate anyway, and they'll spread a little easier that way.
So cut, say, here?
Yeah, just like, trimming your hair when the scraggly end gets sticking out there,
Just a little
Get off the split ends.
Gosh, that smells so good. I just want to take a big bite of it right now. It smells delicious. Okay, so those babies are ready to go. So the thickness, and when we're talking about propagation, do we want length or do we want these little individual sort of hairs, roots? What's most important, the length or the
I like to go with numbers.
The
the more root starts, the better.
Okay.
The more you have, the better. So,
Okay.
and root pruning a little bit will encourage that too.
The smaller the roots, that's where you actually get the most absorption. Kind of like the trees, you got to go get out to that drip line, and that's where all the fine roots are, and that's where you get most of your absorption.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, thank you. So I'll pot these babies up sometime this week. All right, John, we'll go to you with your show and tell.
Okay, I was ready to do this. We've had many calls on what should I do. I've got lots of leaves falling in my flower beds. Should I take them off? And it depends on what kind of leaves you have. I usually put a lot of leaves in my perennial flower beds, but one of them that I don't this is one of them. This is a sycamore, and they are so thick and heavy that they tend to compact, and they'll actually keep the plants. They'll get, my sycamore is about 75 feet tall, and they'll get to the point where they'll be 6 inches of leaves, and they're compacted as the winter goes on, and they'll so that plants cannot break through. Now, what I suggest then is what you put on your flower beds is something that looks like this. This has been run over by the mower, and I've even got some white pine needles in there that help break it up. But you could see it's almost like a dust, but they're all broke up, and that's what you want to put into your flower beds. And especially things like mums after they freeze. I never take everything right to the ground. I usually leave 4 to 6 inches of the plant there, and then if they're tender perennials, if I've ever had them freeze off during the winter, or if they tend to heave, mums tend to heave out of the ground if we get warming and cooling, and so that mulch over that plant keeps the ground kind of at the same temperature, and they survive much easier. And then as soon as it warms up in the spring, say early March, I start to take those off and kind of look for the green underneath. You don't want your plants to be white, if they're, sometimes they stay low like mums, and you want to take that leaf mold off and let the sun hit them, and then so they can do their chlorophyll, the chlorophyll works and get them going. So
Gotcha. And I was just going to ask if you are supposed to go in and remove that, or just kind of work it in for the following year's plantings.
If it depends on what it is. If it's going to come from the ground, you want to take it off, especially if you put quite a bit on. On my fig tree, I'll put up to 3 feet of that mulch to protect it, because it's a zone 7 plant and I'm in zone 5. And so it's I've done it for, this will be next year will be my 9th year, and it's come back, and it gets to it grows from the ground, but it goes all the way to the eave trough, so it grows about 8-10 feet. And sometimes if I don't have a real hard winter, actually it will come out of some of the stems that are within that mulch pile. So, but it is important that you take that mulch off.
Okay. All right. Thank you, John. Marty, we're going to go to you with a question. This is 968 from Annette Coleman. She wants to know if it's time, or if it's too late or too early to move a 3-year-old oak leaf hydrangea plant. Does it want to risk stressing it or killing it during the move? So she wants to know if fall or spring is the best time. What do you think?
I think we've got enough warm weather left before the ground freezes hard that she could moving it now is just fine. If she'd rather wait until spring, she can do that too. You might want to cut it back by half or even 2/3. It depends on the size of the plant. Get out to when you initially begin to dig it, get out 18 inches or so from the crown of the shrub, okay, and dig a little trench around there, okay, and then start there, and then dig deeper, cut out, use a sharpen your spade, sharpen your shovel. That'll be easier on the plant too. A clean cut is much easier than a ragged one. So just cut around in a circle and dig deep enough. I would say you'd have to go probably a foot 15 inches, but 12 inches for sure. Dig around there. Make sure you take plenty of root ball with you and take it out, dig it up, move it immediately, put a hose on it right away, backfill it, and then take the extra soil back to the hole you dug, so you don't have to have a hole in your yard or in your flower bed or wherever it's at your shrub border. So, you're going to have to move the soil, make it easy on yourself. When you're digging the new hole first, put it in the wheelbarrow. It's easier than raking it out of the lawn, believe me. So,
as someone who's done it for 25 years, right?
Yeah. Then drag your hose around and make a pencil thin stream, okay? Like the size of a pencil, no more water coming out than your little finger, okay? Just a pencil thin stream, and put it at the base of the plant and let it run for an hour. All right?
Hey, Marty,
Yeah.
would you recommend that when they dig that, maybe dig the hole the night or the day before and fill it with water? And, and so that, because we're in such a drought that I thought
Yeah,
maybe that might.
I was thinking about that too. I was thinking when you dig the hole it's going in, if it seems very dry, then do like John suggested and, pour 5 gallons of water in that hole.
Wow.
And then, it'll go. I mean, we have incredibly good drainage here in Illinois. So then you can, oh, the sun came out, look at that. Then you can put your plant in it, transplant it, put nice, loose, fine soil around it, no clods, chop it up. If you have a little compost, you can sure put that around there too. Top dress it with some, mulch it really well, like 3-4 inches deep, and then trickle that water on there. And then the next day, water it again. And then 2 days later, water it again. Unless you get an inch of rain, water it about every 3 days until it freezes, because it needs to join the soil in the root ball with the soil on the planet. That's what's going to keep it from freezing and dying over the winter. And that goes for anything you plant in this time of year. You have to make a meld between those two soils. And if you don't, you're going to get air in that down the side of that hole, and then you'll essentially root prune, and that's not always the best idea. So make sure you've got plenty of water, turn that hole to mud. You're not going to hurt it at all.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. We're going to Richard. Question 929. This is a long one, so bear with me, folks. We've got 2 varieties of blueberries, and I recently noticed something seemed to be eating the leaves and the fruit on one plant. But I never saw anything, and the plants are enclosed in a hardware cloth cage to keep the squirrels and birds out. Whew, that infected plant is now subsequently defoliated, and the berries are almost all blemished. More plants are showing damaged leaves. Tonight I noticed the bagworms. We hand-picked as many as we could. Anything else we can do this year or next? That's the question. We try to stick with organic control methods, so I have the bucket of soapy water and hand-picking method down for pests, but these plants represent a lot of time and effort, and I'd also like to prevent such loss in the future if possible. So how can they save their blueberries from bagworms organically?
All right. Well, first off, it's kind of unique that we're finding bagworms on blueberries, but the life cycle of the bagworm is such that the female comes out of its overwintering bag, has the ability to crawl around the plant and lay more eggs. And then what's kind of interesting, the larvae are able to spin a silken thread that they use more like a parasail, and they can float away off the original plant and land somewhere else. And in this case, they landed on your blueberry. Each bag, by the way, if it's on an evergreen, will have one appearance because it uses the needles of the evergreen to make its bag, and on blueberry the bag will look entirely different. It'll have bits of leaf tissue sticking around on it that they construct the bag with. In terms of control, we're very lucky in that, 1, you want to do it organically, and 2, we actually have a product, Bacillus thuringiensis, Kerstaki probably is the right one. This is an organic material. And once the worms come in contact with this, it kind of gives them a very severe tummy ache to the point where they die. And it is very much organic. You couldn't have prevented the bagworms from getting to those plants, as they're extremely small, and they would have just floated right through any wiring or things like that that you had in place around it, where you were keeping bigger wildlife like birds and other things out. you really can't treat unless they're there. So next year, just keep an eye out. The bagworms may never even revisit that blueberry ever again. So as soon as you see a little bit of feeding, it's time to put the BT on, and that should prevent it.
Usually, what time of year is that? Are the bagworms out on your evergreens normally? Is it late June, early July?
Yeah, I was going to say, towards the end of spring, if you will, and as we enter summer, on plants that are their favorites, like junipers, they can defoliate an entire evergreen, eating every needle on the plant. And the more bags you have represent the potential of more females to lay more eggs the following spring. So the damage really does accumulate. So the hand picking is great. If you find a bag that seems hollow and empty, that may even have been an old bag from the previous year, but for sure there's no females inside overwintering. If they're solid and firm, for sure there's a female in there just waiting to provide eggs the coming year.
And don't throw them on the ground. Pick them up, put them in a bag, and haul them away because
they'll just crawl right back up.
Well, they if they're to the point where they're overwintering stage, like I would think right now would be, they won't have that ability. But if you pick them off in the summertime, they carry the bag with them. It's the only bug I know that carries its motel with it. As long as they're crawling about the plant, yeah, they could potentially, if you threw them right on the ground, they could potentially crawl back up. But if they're hanging on the tree like little ornaments at this point, pulling them off and throwing them away is perfectly okay.
And also, I also have one more thing to add to that. It was really dry. Like Richard said, they're so small, you can't keep them out with wire or something. But when you get an infestation of an insect or disease on any kind of a plant, usually it's because that plant is not as healthy as the one they skipped over. It's kind of a natural selection thing, they go for the ones that are weaker, and then the hardy can survive. So especially when it's droughty like this, make sure you have mulch, or if you don't have mulch, at least water. Both would be better. Keep them as healthy as you can, keep them as well watered as you can, and the insects will likely often move on to something that's more pitiful.
Natural selection, right?
That's right. You're going down.
Okay, John, do you have another show and tell, or did we get through all of your items? Okay, go for it.
Okay, this is a Hoya plant, and it's kind of a strange plant in that you can see there's a long stem here that looks dead, but the flower is going to form at the end. So if you have one of these Hoya plants, and they're very interesting, they're kind of a succulent and beautiful. They've got like when they start, before they bloom, they're like a little balloon, but then they open up and they're just spectacular. They've got a whole bunch of blossoms. But don't cut this off because you'll be cutting off the blossoms. And be patient. It takes a while, but a very interesting plant and easy to start once you get them real thick. This is one I just started, last fall. And so I just made a cutting. After it bloomed, I cut this part off and just stuck it into a wet bed, and I had a whole new plant. So, but be patient. Don't cut those tips off just because you think they're dead, because if you do, you won't get the blossom.
I don't think I've ever gotten mine to bloom. I've had it for a very long time. It came in an arrangement, and it's healthy and beautiful, but I don't think I've gotten a bloom on mine before, so I might have to look into it.
You cut those things off. Pay attention.
I don't think I cut it.
Well, don't.
Well, now I'll be watching.
The first time I had a Hoya plant, I cut all of them off, and I was wondering the same thing. Why is everybody else's Hoya blooming and mine isn't? I did some reading, and I found out I was trimming off the blossoms. So
yikes. Okay, I'll be more mindful of that next time.
Tanisha, don't be like John. Don't
be like John.
Don't be like John.
Don't get those pruners out. Just let it go. Let it go. Okay, Marty, this one is for you. Let's do the coffee question. Mariangela, I hope I didn't butcher your name. I tried. Writes in, I love the program. I would like to know your opinion on using coffee grounds in the garden and in potted plants. So I've heard a lot of people do this too. And I know it kind of varies on which plant. So break this down for us.
Yeah. Coffee grounds tend to be acidic. And even if you have an acid-loving plant, I don't know that I'd put grounds right in a pot, especially not in a pot. But I put them in the compost. That's a great place for them. And they kind of get evened out with the more alkaline things. Coffee grounds are kind of an odd addition to the compost pile. They don't really fall in. I guess they're browns. Of course, they're brown colored, but they're not green, but they're not dry either. So they're they're kind of weird that way, but they're great for the compost pile, and I would totally put them on there. But I don't know. I'm not sure I would put them in a pot, in a potted plant in a house. I mean, sure, it smells good, but you know. So,
Anybody else use coffee grounds in another way?
I do put them in the compost pile, and I believe their carbon number, which is you look at when you're looking at composting things. Vegetables have a carbon number of around 15 to 19. Leaves are about 20. I think coffee grounds are around 60. Like sawdust is 400, and so you want kind of a 25 to 45, somewhere that carbon number. You want to kind of make your number in 25 to 45, somewhere in there.
Okay.
And so a little bit of coffee grounds is fine. And
Okay.
the
Just don't
acidity,
overdo it.
yeah, the acidity is going to be gone. They did the testing because of on blueberries. A lot of people were putting them up on blueberries, and they found after 6 months they were back to being neutral. They had deteriorated enough that they were back to being 7.0. So they don't stay
Hydrangea is
acidic.
another acid-loving plant.
Hydrangea,
People use coffee on hydrangea.
Rhododendrons, stuff like that. I didn't know the acidity would diminish like that so much.
It does.
I learned so much on this show. There you go.
After 6 months, they did a test, and it was back to like very close to 7.
Interesting. Okay. All right, we've got
I
time
think
for one more question.
you're better off if you want to acidify something, just use an acid, a food, like a soluble something, and do that with your potted plant.
Okay, thank you. Okay, last one. Richard, this one goes to you. This is from Mr. Miller. Writes in, about a month ago, a friend gave me a grafted weeping cherry. Before they gave it to me, it was in a pot, very stressed with very little care. Planted it, gave it lots of water. It sent out a few branches at the top and a few more about a foot from the bottom. Does it have a chance to recover next spring, and should it receive extra winter protection? But you have another matter entirely that you noticed with this. So go ahead and tell them what you observed.
Okay, thank you. The 3 pictures you provided. Well, first off, weeping cherries are usually budded or grafted onto what's called a standard, which is the trunk of something else totally. And you can see the difference between the foliage that's coming out of the middle of the trunk and the little scrappy bit of foliage is at the very top. So those middle branches are going to be whatever the stock plant is, some other form of a cherry. Sometimes they use lilac villosa, late lilac, as the trunk. So that's those gigantic leaves you're seeing are probably something along that line. Those leaves will never turn into a weeping anything. If the foliage at the top is decidedly different in appearance, that indeed may be weeping cherry come next year. I honestly wouldn't spend a whole lot of time with this one, because the chances of it surviving the winter, as stressed as it is, may be highly questionable. But certainly, worth a try. If it didn't cost you anything and you've got a spot to try it out, go right ahead. But even the close-up of that, up of the very top of that plant, I can't quite tell, but if that foliage is different than those leaves on the middle of the plant, you might have the beginning of your weeping cherry there yet, but it'll just be a wait and see.
Okay. Any tips for how to get that baby to survive the winter so that they can see what develops? Mulch it, cover
I
it,
would
anything?
probably, yep, I'd probably consider mulching it 4, 6 inches, 8 inches worth of a mulch, at least as wide as the pot was when you put it in the ground, or the ball was if it was balled and burlapped. Water it late in the season so there's as much moisture in the root system as possible. By mulching it, you also the ground's going to get cold and stay cold, and when you mulch it, that coldness will be in the ground come next spring, and actually getting it to sprout out again will be delayed because the ground will not warm up as much. So you will also avoid any late or early or late frost, however you want to look at that, which might help it. But if I would guess, that was probably a weeping Higgins cherry or something like that, purely ornamental, white or pink blooms. So that's my thought. Enjoy it for what it is. Whether or not you ever see a weeping cherry again, highly questionable.
Okay. All right, guys. Well, just like that, that was 30 minutes. So thank you all so much for your time and talents and your show and tells. And thank you for watching and hanging with us throughout this wacky year that we have called 2020. And we will see you next time. Thanks and good night.